Naturalism, like realism, is a kind of umbrella term used to describe many artistic phenomena over the past centuries. In the case of naturalism, perceived as the dominant artistic trend of the last third of the 19th century, its use, which is difficult to delineate, raises a number of terminological and conceptual issues. What exactly do we mean by naturalism in painting as a movement? What distinguishes it from realist painting, which was also widespread? How has it been used in contemporary art criticism since the 1870s, and how do we understand it today? Up to where did it expand geographically? How did it appear in different regions of Europe in the last 3 decades of the 19th century? And what are its characteristic features in Hungarian painting? Art historians of the Hungarian National Gallery in Budapest are trying to find answers to the aforementioned questions in the framework of a 4-year research project. Our research is based on the concept of naturalism defined by Gabriel P. Weisberg, based on a very large corpus of works from the 1880s to the 1890s, with common features depicting social themes, rural and urban lifestyles, everyday life, proletarian themes, and the truthfully and objectively perceived reality for which a naturalistic painting technique, such as the abandonment of dark underpainting for the benefit of a brighter palette, and the use of a shiny pearly surface and white grey tones, is essential. The research, which started in the autumn of 2018 and will end in 2022, aims to collect Hungarian memorabilia and study it in an international context, trace the history of the reception of the concept of naturalism in Hungary, while reconstructing the cultural networks through which naturalism took root and spread among Hungarian painters. The research is also an attempt to revise the stereotypes of Hungarian art history writing spanning the 20th century, and examines this ensemble not through the allegedly conservative and outdated Munich academism, but through naturalism, reflecting on the fine arts and social problems of the era, and thus repositioning it. Naturalism, perhaps the most significant trend in European painting in the 1880s and 1890s, was present simultaneously in other European countries only a few years after its emergence in France, and appeared in equal quality from Scotland to Russia and Spain to Hungary. This synchronicity and the particular similarities demand a pan-European study of the phenomenon. Therefore, international collaboration with foreign researchers is an important part of our work. What could be the explanation for the emergence of a transnational, almost universal pictorial language, which has resulted in the birth of a very large number of similar works across Europe? Certain factors help us to elucidate the phenomenon and could contribute to the writing of a pan-European art history. These include the international exhibition system and the art market, the market and circulation of artworks and reproductions, the high prevalence of art collecting, but also the art education and the influence of professors in art academies and private schools. The study of these factors is essential, as the Hungarian students studied and exhibited in Munich for decades, some of them in Paris as well. Thus, they became part of the international institutional system and art networks. Mihály Munkácsy, considered a realist in his early period, was the first in Hungarian art to take his subject matter from the modern world and to depict people living on the margins of society with a socially critical overtone. The realistic approach of his early large-scale genre paintings, painted in Düsseldorf and in Paris, would be unimaginable without the knowledge of Courbet's work. However, some of their traits already points towards naturalism. The pawnbroker shop by Munkácsy is the first urban genre scene in Hungarian painting. The subject of this work, painted in a realistic manner with a dark underpainting, is thematically close to naturalist genre paintings. Its snapshot-like composition, its photographically objective, almost impassive quality, and the fact of being as descriptive as a minute book are true character traits of naturalist painting. Munkácsi's realism was highly influential. He established a tradition that served as a reference for several generations of Hungarian painters. Munkácsi was known for patronizing young Hungarian artists in Paris since the 1880s, many of whom painted in the manner of the increasingly spreading naturalism. At the same time, most young Hungarian artists first met this new artistic approach in Munich. The fundamental experience of the second generation of Hungarian painters in Munich in the 1880s was the painting of Jules Bastien-Lepage, which they encountered at the international exhibitions. As a result, Hungarian artists began to paint following the style of the French painter, which was differentiated in Hungarian criticism from realism with the term subtle naturalism. One of the first widely known manifestations of Hungarian naturalism is Simon Hollószy's corn husking, which he exhibited in 1885. Hollószy started a private school in Munich 1 year later, primarily for Hungarian artists, but it was also open for other nationalities. Hollószy became a role model and leader of the young generation, representing a new way of painting, far from both academic expectations and the world of popular salon genres. Canvases depicting different aspects of peasant life have appeared continuously in the exhibitions of the Budapest Kunsthalle and Munich's Glaspalast since the early 1890s. Most of these works are now internationally known masterpieces of 19th century Hungarian painting, and can be categorized as naturalism, both in terms of content and visuality. At the same time, the naturalist tendency became more and more widespread outside the Hollószy school, mainly through Munich, and can be discovered in the work of most contemporary Hungarian painters. In a few years, style became the prominent factor, whilst regarding the subject matter, Hungarian painters no longer insisted on the classically naturalist topics, such as proletarian themes, for instance. On the other hand, the increasingly emphatic use of photography fundamentally influenced the development of naturalism. Although the use of photography as a tool for painting was not novelty, the simplification of the technology, the invention of dry plate and fast shutter speed cameras, and the advent of film processing darkrooms in the 1870s and 1880s essentially changed the role of photography. Not only has it become possible to take real snapshots, but photography has become easily accessible to everyone. Several studies and exhibitions have dealt with the impact of photography and painting and their interaction in the second half of the 19th century. Based on these researches, it can be affirmed that from the 1870s, painting based on photography was part of the artistic practice. Munich was one of the European centers for professional photography education, and in Paris, Jean-Léon Gérôme encouraged his students at the École des Beaux-Arts, for example Jules Bastien-Lepage and Daniel Bouvier, to use photography as a tool. Thomas Eakins, who later gained reputation as a photographer, was also his student. The use of photography as a reference for naturalist paintings gives an explanation for the striking similarities regardless of geography. The snapshot-like time-frozen scenes, the use of close-ups in front of the high horizon, the bottom view. The homogeneous, delicately shiny surface of the early photographs could also explain the equally homogeneous, pearlescent, greyish treatment of the painting surface. Hungarian art students certainly encountered photography while studying in Munich or visiting Paris. Whether using photography as a tool was accessible or evident to them still requires further research. So far, not much material evidence, photographs, has emerged from the legacies, and recollections, sources, and art critiques hardly give us more information. According to Weisberg, painters didn't brag about making use of photography. In some cases, however, photography used as a tool in the process of painting is certain, and these specific examples suggest that there should be others. An outstanding example of both Hungarian naturalism and the use of photography is the Haymakers of István Csók, which allows us to study many features of naturalism. Csók spent the end of the 1880s in Paris, attending the Julian Academy, and immersed himself in the artistic life of the French capital. The Haymakers was painted during his summer sojourns in Hungary in 1889-1890, following the example of Bastien Lepage, and even more that of Daniel Bouverie, whose anxiously meticulous working technique was mentioned several times in Csók's memoirs. Recent research into Csók's oeuvre has revealed a photograph that proves that the artist also used photography while elaborating his work. The arrangement of the figures, basically the whole composition, is discernible on the photo, despite its very poor condition. The high horizon reinforces the monumentality of the figures, a common feature in most contemporary depictions of labor. But Csók's personal attitude does not lead towards some dramatic atmosphere, but rather to the capturing of the idyllic aspect of peasant life. Born in the countryside, this was a familiar subject to Csók, who certainly saw peasants resting during haymaking countless times. The meticulous, material-like rendering of the details, the delicate light surface, which is not least due to the complete abandonment of the dark underpainting, makes this picture one of the best-known Hungarian works of contemporary naturalist painting. Thus, we can conclude, according to the current state of the research, that the Hungarian painters trained in Munich and Paris took part in the European current of naturalism in the 1880s and 1890s. Naturalism in Hungary is characterized by the domestication of social problems and the capture of small, everyday scenes of urban and rural existence with a serene sentiment, although paintings with a more critical tone do appear as well. Should we consider naturalism as a purely formal, painterly manner, that is to say, a naturalist manner of painting? That would significantly expand the scope of the research, but it would also allow us to approach almost the entire Hungarian corpus of the last third of the 19th century from a new perspective. However, in this case, one should consider the manifold relations of naturalism to other art tendencies of the era, such as academicism, impressionism, especially considering the use of photography, and symbolism. In order to elucidate these questions, it is necessary to study the French and Hungarian terminology, the use of terms in contemporary art criticism, to better understand European naturalisms, to explore the operation of the exhibition and reproduction industry, and the academic and private school education. To that end, our research group is organizing an online workshop for May 2021, to which foreign researchers are more than welcome.